The crystalline towers of Valoria shimmered under 3 purple moons as Commander Lauren Hayes stood on the observation deck of her research station. She had been watching the planet below for hours now, unable to look away from the scene unfolding in the sacred garden. Lauren was human, but she had spent 5 years studying the mysterious Velkari race and their bond with the massive star, dragons that circled their world like living satellites. Queen Serafina knelt in the garden below, her silver hair flowing like liquid metal in the strange wind that seemed to come from nowhere. Her hands pressed against the scales of her dragon Ember, and even from this distance Lauren could see the creature was dying. The great beast had been magnificent once, with scales that reflected every color of the spectrum, and wings that could create storms with a single flap. Now those scales were dull and cracking like old paint on forgotten walls. Lauren had known this moment was coming. She had discovered the truth 3 months ago when analyzing strange readings from the Velkari homeworld. A bioweapon had been deployed, something designed specifically to target the neural link between the Velkari and their dragons. It was brilliant in its cruelty because it did not kill quickly. Instead, it slowly severed the connection that had existed for millennia, causing both dragon and rider to experience a grief so profound that many chose to die together rather than live apart. The weapon had been created by humans, by her own people. A rogue faction within the military had decided that the Velkari Empire was too powerful, that humanity needed to be the dominant force in this sector of space. They had studied the dragons for years, learning their biology, their connection to their riders, and then they had engineered a virus that attacked that very bond. Ember was the first casualty, but he would not be the last. Lauren had tried to stop it. She had sent reports to her superiors, had begged them to intervene, had even threatened to go public with the information. But she had been too late. The weapon had already been deployed, hidden in a shipment of medical supplies that the Velkari had requested during a plague outbreak in their outer colonies. By the time anyone realized what was happening, Ember was already infected. Down in the garden, Queen Serafina began to weep. Lauren had never seen a Velkari cry before. Their biology was different from humans, and she had assumed they expressed grief in other ways. But now she watched as tears fell from the Queen's eyes, and those tears were unlike anything she had ever witnessed. They glowed with an ethereal blue light that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. When they hit the ground, they sizzled and steamed, creating small craters in the soil. The other dragon sensed it immediately. Ember's massive head lifted despite his weakness, and he let out a roar that shook the atmosphere. The sound was so powerful that it registered on Lauren's equipment as a seismic event. Above the planet, dozens of star dragons emerged from hyperspace, their scales reflecting starlight like living constellations. They descended in a spiral formation, their ancient eyes fixed on their dying brother and their grieving queen. Lauren grabbed her communicator and tried to call her assistant, Amy Chen, who was stationed near the royal palace. But the line was filled with static and interference. She tried the backup channels and then the emergency frequencies, but nothing worked. Something was blocking all communication. She looked at her instruments and saw the readings were going crazy. An electromagnetic pulse was radiating from the garden, disrupting every piece of technology within a kilometer radius. It was the tears. The glowing substance from Queen Serafina's eyes was releasing energy that interfered with electronic equipment. Lauren had read about this in the ancient texts, but she had assumed it was mythology. The Velkari legends spoke of the tears of royalty as having power, but she had never imagined it was literal. Down in the garden, more tears fell, and now Lauren could see what was happening to the craters they created. Small plants were emerging from the glowing puddles, growing at an impossible rate. Within seconds, they were as tall as saplings, and within minutes, they were trees with trunks as thick as a human's torso. The leaves pulsed with the same blue light as the tears, and the branches moved with purpose as if searching for something. The star dragons landing around the garden seemed to understand what was happening. They formed a protective circle, their massive bodies, creating a wall of scales and muscle around their queen and the dying. Ember, the largest dragon, a scarred veteran named Thunder, positioned himself at the entrance to the garden, his eyes scanning the sky for threats. These dragons had lived for thousands of years, and they had seen things that would drive lesser beings mad. But even they seemed awed by what was happening. Lauren made a decision that would change her life forever. She could not stay on the observation deck watching from safety while history unfolded below. She had information that the Queen needed to know. She had the names of those responsible for Ember's condition, their locations, and their plans for future attacks. If she stayed silent, more dragons would die and the fragile peace between humanity and the Velkari would shatter completely. She left her post and ran to the transport shuttle bay. The security officer on duty tried to stop her, reminding her that the planet below was under quarantine, and no one was allowed to land without authorization from both human and Velkari authorities. But Lauren had spent 5 years earning the trust of both species, and she had clearances that most people could only dream of. She overrode the security protocols and launched the shuttle knowing that she was probably ending her career, but not caring anymore. The descent through the atmosphere was rough. The electromagnetic interference from the garden was affecting her navigation systems, and she had to pilot manually using only visual references. The shuttle shook and rattled as it cut through the clouds, and for a moment Lauren thought she might crash. But her training kicked in and she managed to bring the craft down in a clearing about half a kilometer from the garden. The moment she stepped out of the shuttle, she felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon her. The star dragons had sensed her arrival, and they were watching her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. She had worked with dragons before, had even touched a few of the younger ones, but she had never been surrounded by so many ancient, powerful beings at once. Their presence was overwhelming, like standing next to a star and feeling its heat and gravity pulling at you. She walked slowly toward the garden, her hands visible and empty to show she meant no harm. The dragons did not move, but she could feel them evaluating her, measuring her worth and deciding whether she should live or die. Thunder. The scarred veteran lowered his massive head until it was level with hers, and she looked into his eye, which was larger than her entire body. In that eye, she saw intelligence and wisdom that went back thousands of years, and she felt very small and very young, but Thunder must have seen something in her that satisfied him because he stepped aside and allowed her to pass. Lauren walked through the circle of dragons, feeling their breath on her back and their eyes burning into her soul. When she finally reached the inner garden, she saw Queen Seraphina standing over Ember, her hand on his snout and her tears still falling, creating more of those strange glowing trees. The queen looked up at her, and Lauren saw an expression that made her blood run cold. It was not anger exactly, though there was rage there. It was something deeper and more terrible. It was the look of someone who had lost everything and was about to make the universe pay for that loss. "You have come, human," the queen said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. "You have come to witness the end of peace." Lauren Hayes stood before Queen Seraphina, feeling the weight of every mistake her species had ever made. The garden around them glowed with an otherworldly light from the tear thorns that continued to grow and spread their roots, digging deep into the soil while their branches reached toward the sky. The air smelled of ozone and something else, something ancient and powerful that made the hair on Lauren's arms stand up. "I have not come to witness the end of peace, Your Majesty," Lauren said, keeping her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "I have come to offer you justice." The queen tilted her head, studying Lauren with eyes that seemed to look past flesh and bone directly into her soul. Seraphina was tall for her kind, standing nearly 7 feet, with a grace that made every movement look like a dance. Her silver hair had begun to take on streaks of blue from her tears, and those tears continued to fall, leaving glowing trails down her pale cheeks. "Justice," the queen repeated the word as if tasting it. "What do you know of justice, human? Your kind has poisoned my oldest friend, my companion of 3 centuries, and you speak to me of justice." Lauren took a step closer, ignoring the warning growl from Thunder, who still watched from the edge of the garden. "I know who did this, Your Majesty. I know their names, their locations, and I know they plan to do it again. The bioweapon that infected Ember was created by a rogue faction within the human military. They acted without authorization from our government. They are criminals, and they must be stopped." Seraphina looked down at Ember, whose breathing had become shallow and labored. The great dragon opened one eye and fixed it on Lauren. In that moment, she felt his consciousness brush against hers, and the sensation was overwhelming. She saw flashes of memory flying through nebula clouds with the queen as a young rider battling against the machine collectives in the War of the Outer Rim, watching stars being born and dying over the course of centuries. She felt his love for Seraphina, a bond so deep and complete that it transcended what humans called friendship or loyalty, and she felt his pain, not just the physical agony of the poison in his system, but the emotional torment of knowing he was leaving her behind. The connection broke, and Lauren staggered, gasping for air. Tears were streaming down her face now, human tears that did not glow or burn, but were no less real for their ordinariness. She looked at the queen and saw understanding dawn in those ancient eyes. You felt it, Serafina said softly. You felt what we share, what your people are trying to destroy. Yes, Lauren whispered. And I swear to you on everything I hold sacred, that those responsible will answer for this crime. But you must let me help you. If you strike out blindly, if you attack human colonies in revenge, you will start a war that neither of our species can afford. Let me guide you to the guilty. Let me help you find justice, not vengeance. The Queen was silent for a long moment. Around them, the tear thorns had grown to enormous size, their trunks now as wide as starship hulls. The branches swayed despite there being no wind, and Lauren realized they were moving with purpose. They were orienting themselves like compass needles, all pointing in the same direction. The tear thorns know, Serafina said, following Lauren's gaze. They are a gift from our ancestors, a weapon that appears only when a member of the royal line experiences true anguish. They grow toward those who cause the pain, and they do not stop until justice is served. They cannot be reasoned with or controlled. They simply are. Lauren felt her stomach drop. Then we need to move quickly. If those thorns reach the base where the faction is hiding before we can evacuate the innocent people, there will be a massacre. The Queen looked at her with an expression that might have been amusement if it were not so terrible. And why should I care about the innocent among your people, human? Did they care about the innocent dragons who will die from this weapon? Did they speak out against their leaders when the decision was made to attack us? Because you are better than them, Lauren said, meeting the Queen's gaze without flinching. Because you have lived for over 400 years and you have seen civilizations rise and fall. Because you know that hatred only breeds more hatred and that the cycle has to end somewhere. And because Ember would not want you to become the monster your enemies claim you to be. At the mention of Ember's name, the great dragon stirred. He lifted his head with what must have been enormous effort and made a sound deep in his throat. It was not quite a growl and not quite a purr, but something in between. The Queen immediately went to him, pressing her forehead against his snout and speaking in the old tongue of her people. Lauren could not understand the words, but she understood the meaning. It was goodbye. Ember looked at Lauren one more time, and she felt another brush of his consciousness. This time there were no memories, just a feeling of approval and hope. The dragon was giving her his blessing, was asking her to protect his rider and his people from the darkness that threatened to consume them all. Then his eye closed and the light within it faded. His chest rose one final time and then went still. The Queen's scream was not sound in the traditional sense. It was something deeper, a psychic wave that radiated out from her in all directions. Lauren felt it hit her like a physical force, driving her to her knees. The dragons around the garden all threw back their heads and roared in unison, creating a symphony of grief that could be heard across the entire hemisphere. And the tear thorns responded to that grief by growing faster, their branches shooting upward like missiles breaking through the atmosphere and into space itself. Lauren struggled to her feet, her ears ringing and her head pounding. She activated her communicator, praying that the electromagnetic interference had faded enough for a signal to get through. "Amy," she shouted into the device.
"Amy, can you hear me?"
Static filled the line for a moment. Then her assistant's voice came through, weak and distorted. "Lauren, where are you? The sensors are going crazy and there are reports of massive plant structures breaking orbit." "Listen carefully," Lauren said. "I need you to contact Admiral Peterson at Central Command. Tell him to evacuate the research facility at coordinates 793 by 421. Tell him it's an emergency and he has less than an hour. Do not tell him why, just do it. Lauren, that facility is classified. I do not have clearance to even know it exists." "You do now," Lauren said. "And Amy, if Peterson refuses, tell him that Commander Hayes has evidence of treason by General Marcus Holland and that, unless he wants to be implicated in war crimes, he will evacuate that facility immediately." There was a pause, then Amy said, "Understood." "Be careful, Lauren." The line went dead and Lauren turned back to the Queen, who was still kneeling beside Ember's body. The tear thorns had stopped growing, but they remained pointing toward their target, tracking it across space with unerring accuracy. Lauren approached slowly and knelt beside Serafina. "I have ordered an evacuation of the facility where the weapon was created," she said quietly. "But the tear thorns will still reach it. We need to go there together. You need to see that justice is done properly, that the guilty are punished according to law, not destroyed by ancient magic." Serafina did not look at her. "Why should I trust you, human? You say you want justice, but what if your people protect these criminals? What if they hide behind their laws and their courts? Then I will help you tear those protections down," Lauren said. "But give them a chance to do the right thing. Give humanity a chance to prove we are better than our worst members." The Queen finally turned to look at her, and Lauren saw that the blue streaks in her hair had spread until half of it glowed with that ethereal light. Very well, she said. We will go to this facility together. But know this, if your people fail to deliver justice, the Tearthorns will finish what they started, and neither you nor anyone else will be able to stop them. The journey to the hidden research facility took 6 hours by starship, and every moment of it felt like an eternity to Lauren. Queen Seraphina had insisted on traveling aboard her royal vessel, the Starweaver, a massive ship that looked more like a living creature than a machine. Its hull was made from dragon scales harvested from those who had died naturally over millennia, and it shimmered with the same iridescent quality as the creatures themselves. The ship did not have engines in the traditional sense. Instead, it moved through space by manipulating gravity fields in ways that human scientists still did not fully understand. Lauren sat in the observation chamber watching the stars streak past, while the Queen stood at the front of the room in meditation. Behind them, 4 star dragons flew in formation, keeping pace with the ship despite the impossible speeds they were traveling. These were the elder dragons, the ones who had fought beside Seraphina in countless battles, and who would die for her without hesitation. Their presence was both comforting and terrifying. Amy had confirmed that Admiral Peterson had ordered the evacuation of the facility, though he had not done so willingly. It had taken threats of court-martial, and the revelation that Lauren had copies of all the research data to convince him. By the time the Starweaver arrived at the coordinates, most of the personnel had been evacuated. Only a skeleton crew remained, and they were in the process of destroying evidence. The facility itself was hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid in a system that had been marked as lifeless and unremarkable on all official charts. It was the perfect place for illegal research, far from prying eyes and protected by layers of security that would make even a paranoid dictator jealous. But none of those defenses were designed to stop what was coming. The Tearthorns had reached the system an hour before the Starweaver. They moved through space like living spears, their roots trailing behind them like the tails of comets. When they reached the asteroid, they did not slow down or deviate from their course. They simply punched through the outer shell with enough force to trigger seismic events throughout the entire structure. Alarms were blaring and emergency lights were flashing as the Starweaver entered the asteroid's emergency docking bay. "Your Majesty," Lauren said as they prepared to disembark. "Please remember that many of the people here were following orders. They may not have known what they were truly working on." Seraphina looked at her with eyes that had gone cold as ice. "Ignorance is not innocence, Commander. Those who choose not to question those who blindly follow evil orders are complicit in the evil itself. But I will restrain myself for now. Show me the ones who gave those orders." They walked through corridors filled with smoke and the sound of grinding metal. The Tearthorns had penetrated deep into the facility and were still growing, their branches spreading through hallways and laboratories like veins. Wherever they touched technology, it failed. Computers sparked and died. Life support systems flickered and went offline. It was as if the Thorns were allergic to artificial things, seeking only the organic, the living. They found General Marcus Holland in the main laboratory, surrounded by his inner circle. There were 5 of them in total, including the lead scientist, Dr. Patricia Grant, and 3 high-ranking officers who had helped plan and execute the bioweapon deployment. They were attempting to destroy the last of their research-burning files and wiping data cores, but they stopped when they saw the Queen enter. Holland was a man in his 60s with gray hair and the kind of face that looked trustworthy, which made his crimes all the more despicable. He straightened when he saw Seraphina, and Lauren could see him calculating his options, trying to figure out if he could talk his way out of this situation. "Queen, Seraphina," he said with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "This is unexpected. I was not aware that diplomatic channels had been opened. If I had known you were coming, I would have prepared a proper welcome." Seraphina said nothing. She simply walked forward, her silver hair flowing behind her, and the blue streaks in it pulsing with light. The star dragons had followed her into the facility, their massive bodies barely fitting through the corridors, and they now stood behind her like living mountains. Thunder, the scarred veteran, fixed his ancient eyes on Holland, and the general finally realized that charm and deception would not save him. "You created a weapon designed to kill dragons," the Queen said, her voice soft but carrying a threat that made everyone in the room take a step back. "You deployed it knowing it would cause suffering beyond measure, and you did this why? For power? For pride?" Dr. Grant stepped forward, trying to salvage the situation. "Your Majesty, we were acting to protect humanity. Your empire controls resources that we need to survive. We were simply trying to level the playing field." By murdering innocent creatures, Serafina said, turning her gaze on the scientist. By severing bonds that have existed since before your species learned to make fire. Tell me, Dr. Grant, do you have family? The scientist hesitated, then nodded. I have a daughter. She is 8 years old. And if someone decided that to level the playing field they needed to kill your daughter, would you consider that acceptable? Would you understand their reasoning? Grant paled and said nothing. The Queen continued circling the group like a predator sizing up prey. Lauren wanted to intervene, wanted to remind Serafina that they needed these people alive for trial, but she also knew that sometimes people needed to face the full weight of their actions, without anyone softening the blow. Holland found his voice again. You cannot threaten us. We are protected by human law and by our military. Any action you take against us will be considered an act of war. Thunder growled low in his throat, and the sound made the entire facility shake. Serafina held up a hand to calm him, but her eyes never left Holland. You speak of law and protection as if those concepts mean anything to me. I have lived for over 4 centuries, General. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched stars die and new ones being born. Your laws are meaningless to me. Then why are you here? One of the officers asked. If our laws mean nothing, why did you not simply destroy this facility and everyone in it? Because she is better than you, Lauren said, stepping forward. Because despite everything you have done, she is willing to give humanity a chance to prove we deserve to exist in this galaxy. She is offering you the opportunity to face justice, to be tried for your crimes, and to accept the consequences of your actions. That is more mercy than you showed Ember. Ember, Holland said, confused. Who is Ember? Serafina's hand moved faster than Lauren could track. One moment she was standing still, the next her fingers were wrapped around Holland's throat, lifting him off the ground as if he weighed nothing. Her strength was not purely physical. It was enhanced by centuries of bonding with dragons and by a rage that had been building since Ember's death. Ember was my friend, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. He was my companion, my guardian, my family. We flew together through the heart of supernovas. We fought together against enemies that would have destroyed entire civilizations. And you killed him slowly, painfully, for the crime of being bonded to me. She threw Holland across the room and he slammed into the wall hard enough to crack the metal. The other conspirators moved to help him, but the Star Dragon stepped forward, blocking their path. Thunder opened his mouth and flames licked around his teeth, not enough to burn, but enough to send a clear message. Lauren moved to Serafina's side. Your Majesty, we need them alive. They need to stand trial to face the judgment of both our peoples. That is how we break the cycle of violence. The Queen looked at her, and for a moment Lauren thought she would refuse. Then slowly Serafina nodded. Very well, Commander. They will live to face justice. But if that justice fails, if your people protect these criminals, then I will return. And I will finish what the Tearthorns started. Behind them a section of wall exploded, inward as more Tearthorns burst through, seeking their targets. They wrapped around the conspirators, not squeezing hard enough to kill, but holding them immobile. The thorns pulsed with that eerie blue light, and Lauren could see veins of the same color spreading across the skin of those they held. It was not painful, she realized, but it was marking them, ensuring they could never escape, never hide from the consequences of their actions. Admiral Peterson arrived with a security team, weapons drawn, but unsure who to point them at. He looked at Lauren, then at the Queen, then at the conspirators held by the glowing plants. Someone want to tell me what is happening here, he said. Admiral Peterson stood in the doorway of the laboratory, surrounded by 20 armed soldiers, who looked increasingly uncomfortable as the Star Dragons turned their ancient eyes toward them. Peterson was a career military man in his 50s, with the kind of weathered face that came from decades of making difficult decisions. Lauren had worked with him before, and she knew he was fair-minded but also practical. He would not start a war he could not win, Admiral Lauren said, stepping forward carefully. General Holland and his team have been developing and deploying illegal bioweapons against the Velkari Empire. I have documented evidence of their crimes, including communication logs, research data, and testimony from several of the scientists who were coerced into participating. These people need to be taken into custody and charged with war crimes. Peterson looked at Holland, who was still slumped against the wall, holding his throat, where Serafina had grabbed him. The general tried to speak but could only manage a wheeze. The admiral then looked at the Tearthorns. That held the other conspirators, and Lauren could see him, doing calculations in his head, weighing the political implications against the moral necessities, and Queen Seraphina Peterson said, turning his attention to the elf woman. What is your position on this matter? Are you here seeking vengeance or justice? The queen stepped forward and every soldier in the room tensed. Thunder moved with her, his massive body filling the doorway and making it clear that the security team would not stand a chance if violence erupted. But Seraphina raised her hand in a peaceful gesture, and the dragon stopped. Admiral Peterson, I am here because Commander Hayes convinced me to give humanity a chance to do what is right, she said. My dragon ember is dead. Dozens more will die in the coming months as the weapon spreads through our population. The bond between rider and dragon is not something your people understand. But imagine if someone created a disease that slowly erased every memory you had of the people you love. That is what this weapon does to us. Peterson was silent for a long moment, then he nodded. I understand, Your Majesty, and I give you my word that these people will face justice under both human and Velkhari law. But I need you to release them from those plants so I can take them into proper custody. Seraphina looked at the tearthorns, and Lauren wondered if the queen even had the power to control them. But after a moment, the glowing plants began to retract their branches, unwinding from around the conspirators. The blue veins remained on their skin, however, pulsing with a faint light. The marks will remain until justice is served, the queen explained. They cannot be removed by any technology or magic your people possess. If these criminals attempt to flee, the tearthorns will know and they will hunt them down. If they are protected by corrupt officials, the thorns will find those officials as well. There is nowhere in this galaxy they can hide. Holland finally found his voice. You cannot do this, he rasped. I have rights. I demand to speak with my lawyer. You have the right to a trial, Peterson said coldly. Nothing more. Take them into custody. The soldiers moved forward, placing restraints on Holland and his team. Dr. Grant was crying quietly, her hands shaking as the reality of her situation set in. The three officers remained silent, their faces blank as if they had already accepted their fate. As they were led away, Holland turned back to look at Seraphina. This is not over, he said. There are others who think like me. Others who believe humanity should not bow to alien powers. You may have stopped us, but you cannot stop the movement. Seraphina walked up to him until they were face to face. I am not asking humanity to bow, she said softly. I am asking you to coexist. But if your species chooses war, then know this, we have been fighting wars since before your ancestors discovered fire. We have weapons that make your biotoxins look like children's toys. And we have the patience to wait centuries for the right moment to strike. Do not mistake mercy for weakness, General. Holland was led away and Peterson ordered his team to begin securing the facility. He turned to Lauren and there was something like respect in his eyes. You did good work here, Commander. I do not know how you managed to prevent a war, but you did. I will make sure your report reaches the right people. Thank you, Sir, Lauren said. But this is just the beginning. We need to establish a joint task force to hunt down any remaining samples of the bioweapon. We need to develop a cure, or at least a treatment for the infected dragons. And we need to create new protocols to prevent anything like this from happening again. Agreed, Peterson said. I will recommend you to lead that task force. You have earned the trust of both species, and that is a rare thing. Over the following weeks, Lauren worked tirelessly to build bridges between humanity and the Velkhari Empire. The trial of Holland and his conspirators was held on neutral ground, a space station jointly operated by both species. Lawyers from 3 different civilizations argued the case while representatives from a dozen others watched to see how justice would be served. The evidence Lauren had gathered was overwhelming and the jury took only 4 hours to reach a verdict. Guilty on all counts. The sentence was life imprisonment without possibility of parole in a facility designed to hold war criminals from multiple species. Additionally, the convicts were required to work on developing a cure for the bioweapon, with any progress going directly to helping the infected dragons. Seraphina attended the trial, every day sitting in the gallery and watching with those ancient eyes. Lauren sat beside her and they spoke rarely, but when they did, it was with the understanding of 2 people who had been through something profound together. On the final day after the sentence was read, the Queen stood and addressed the court. Justice has been served, she said. But justice alone cannot heal the wounds that have been inflicted. Ember is gone and nothing will bring him back. However, I believe that from this tragedy something good can come. I propose an alliance between the Velkhari Empire and humanity. Not a treaty of convenience, but a true partnership built on mutual respect and shared goals. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some supported the idea while others argued it was too soon, that trust needed to be rebuilt slowly over time. But Lauren stood and added her voice to the Queen's. Queen Seraphina is right, she said. We can choose to let this divide us, to retreat behind our borders and view each other with suspicion. Or we can choose to move forward together. The universe is vast, and there are threats out there that neither of our species can face alone. The machine collectives are still active in the outer rim. The dimensional rifts near the core systems are growing. We need each other. The debate continued for days, but eventually a framework was agreed upon. The Velkari would share their knowledge of dragon bonding and their advanced biotechnology. Humanity would provide resources and manufacturing capabilities. Together they would establish research stations in key systems and create joint defense fleets to protect both their territories. Lauren was promoted to ambassador and given the task of overseeing the implementation of the alliance. She moved to Valoria, the Velkari homeworld, and established her residence in the capital city. The Queen gave her quarters in the royal palace itself, a sign of the respect and trust that had grown between them. One evening, several months after the trial, Lauren found Seraphina in the sacred garden where Ember had died. The tearthorns had been transformed into a memorial, their glowing branches now crystallized into a permanent structure that would stand for millennia. At the center was a statue of Ember carved from starstone, with every detail of his scales and features preserved perfectly. He would be proud of you, Lauren said, standing beside the Queen. Seraphina smiled sadly. He always believed in second chances and the possibility of redemption. I think that is why he gave you his blessing at the end. He saw in you the potential for humanity to be better than its worst members. They stood in silence for a moment. Then the Queen spoke again. I have decided to take a new dragon, not to replace Ember because that would be impossible, but to honor his memory by continuing the bond he cherished so much. There's a young dragon named Storm who has chosen me. The bonding ceremony will be in 3 days. I would like you to be there. Lauren felt tears sting her eyes. It would be an honor, Your Majesty, please, the Queen said. Call me Seraphina. We are friends now, are we not? Yes, Lauren said, smiling. We are friends. The bonding ceremony took place at dawn, when all 3 of Valoria's moons were still visible in the pale purple sky. Lauren stood among hundreds of Velkari who had gathered to witness their queen take a new dragon companion. The sacred garden had been restored and expanded, with new flowers and trees planted around the crystallized tearthorn memorial. The air smelled of something sweet and spicy that Lauren could not quite identify, but it made her feel both peaceful and alert. Storm arrived first, descending from the clouds with wings that seemed to be made of actual storm clouds. Lightning flickered between his scales and thunder rumbled with each beat of his massive wings. He was younger than Ember had been, perhaps only 2 centuries old, but he was already impressive in size and power. His scales were dark gray like the sky before a hurricane, and his eyes were the bright blue of lightning strikes. The dragon landed in the center of the garden and folded his wings carefully. He looked around at the gathered crowd, and Lauren felt his consciousness brush against hers briefly. It was not as intense as when Ember had touched her mind, but it was still overwhelming. She got a sense of curiosity and determination from Storm, a fierce protective instinct that would make him an excellent guardian for the Queen. Queen. Seraphina emerged from the palace wearing traditional bonding robes that shimmered with embedded dragon scales from generations of her ancestors. Her silver hair was unbound, flowing down her back like a waterfall, and the blue streaks that had appeared after Ember's death had now become permanent, marking her as someone who had experienced profound loss and survived it. She walked slowly towards Storm, her bare feet, leaving glowing footprints on the grass, another side effect of her tears that had altered her biology in subtle ways. The ceremony itself was simple, but powerful. Seraphina placed her hand on Storm's snout and spoke the ancient words of bonding in the old tongue. The dragon responded with words of his own, his voice resonating in a frequency that humans could not naturally speak, but Lauren felt the meaning in her bones. It was a promise, a vow to protect and serve and to share life itself with another being. Light exploded from where their skin touched, spreading up Seraphina's arm and across Storm's scales. It was the same blue glow as the tearthorns, but brighter, more intense. The crowd gasped as the light grew so bright it was like a second sun had appeared in the garden. Then slowly it faded, leaving both queen and dragon marked with matching patterns of glowing lines that pulsed in sync with their heartbeats. The bond was complete. Serafina climbed onto Storm's back without needing a saddle or harness, and the dragon spread his wings. With a single powerful leap, they were airborne, soaring into the sky as one being. The crowd cheered, and Lauren found herself cheering with them, tears of joy streaming down her face. It was a new beginning for the Queen, and perhaps for all of them. Over the next year, the alliance between humanity and the Velkhari Empire grew stronger. Joint research teams made breakthrough discoveries in medicine engineering and xenobiology. The cure for the bioweapon was developed and administered to all infected dragons, saving countless lives. Human colonists and Velkhari citizens began living side by side on frontier worlds, learning each other's cultures and languages. There were tensions, of course, and occasional incidents, but overall the partnership was working. Lauren traveled constantly between human and Velkhari space, serving as both ambassador and mediator. She resolved disputes, negotiated trade agreements, and helped establish educational exchange programs. She also worked closely with Amy Chen, who had been promoted to assistant ambassador and who brought a fresh perspective to the complex diplomatic challenges they faced. One day, Lauren received a message from Admiral Peterson, asking her to return to Earth for an important meeting. She took a commercial transport rather than bothering the Queen for use of the Starweaver, and spent the 3-week journey catching up on reports and correspondence. When she arrived at the Admiral's office, she found him sitting with several people she recognized as leaders in the human government. Commander Hayes Peterson said, gesturing to a chair, "Thank you for coming. We have a situation that requires your expertise." A holographic display activated, showing a star map of the Outer Rim territories. Red markers indicated areas where strange energy readings had been detected. Lauren leaned forward, studying the data with a growing sense of unease. "What am I looking at?" she asked. "We think it's the machine collectives," one of the officials said. "They have been quiet for the past decade, but intelligence suggests they are massing forces for a major offensive. The targets appear to be both human and Velkhari colonies." Lauren felt her stomach drop. The machine collectives were artificial intelligence entities that had gone rogue centuries ago. They viewed organic life as inefficient and inferior, and they had been systematically eliminating biological civilizations in their sector of space. The Velkhari had fought them to a stalemate years ago, but at great cost. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Months at most," Peterson said. "We need to coordinate a joint defense with the Velkhari, and we need someone who both sides trust to lead the effort. That person is you." Lauren looked at the star map, calculating resources and logistics in her head. This was bigger than anything they had faced before. It would require complete cooperation between species that still had deep-seated prejudices and fears. But she also knew it was necessary. If the machines broke through here, they would threaten the entire region. "I will need full authority to make decisions in the field," she said. "I cannot waste time seeking approval for every tactical choice." "You will have it," Peterson said. "The Council has already approved your appointment as Supreme Commander of the Joint Defense Force. You will report directly to a committee consisting of human and Velkhari leadership, but operational decisions are yours to make." Lauren stood and saluted. "I will not let you down, sir." She left the meeting and immediately opened a secure channel to Queen Serafina. The Queen's face appeared in the hologram, looking concerned. "The machines are moving again," Lauren said without preamble. "We need to talk." Over the next weeks, Lauren assembled the largest joint military force in recorded history. Human battleships flew alongside Velkhari Star Dragons. Human Marines trained with Velkhari ground troops. Engineers from both species worked together to upgrade weapons and defensive systems. It was chaos at first, with communication problems and cultural misunderstandings causing constant friction. But slowly, surely, they began to function as a single unit. Queen Serafina led the Velkhari forces, personally flying Storm into battle planning sessions and inspiring her people with speeches that reminded them of their proud warrior heritage. Lauren stood beside her at every briefing, adding human tactical analysis to Velkhari strategic wisdom. They made a good team, complementing each other's strengths and compensating for each other's weaknesses. The machine collective attacked 3 months after the initial intelligence reports. They came in waves, thousands of automated ships that moved with perfect coordination. The first battles were brutal, with casualties on both sides, but the Joint Defense Force held their ground, adapting to the machine's tactics and finding weaknesses in their programming. Lauren commanded from the bridge of a human carrier, coordinating fleet movements and resource allocation. Serafina flew Storm directly into combat, using the dragon's abilities to disrupt machine communications and create openings for human strike fighters. They developed new combined tactics using dragon lightning to overload machine shields while human weapons delivered the killing blow. The war lasted 6 months. There were victories and defeats, heroes and tragedies. But through it all, the Alliance held firm. When human colonies were threatened, Velkari dragons arrived to defend them. When Velkari worlds were attacked, human fleets jumped in to provide support. The machines had calculated that the Alliance would break under pressure, that old prejudices would resurface. They were wrong. The final battle took place near a neutron star where the machines had established their central processing hub. Lauren led the attack personally, commanding a strike force of 50 ships and 200 dragons. The fighting was intense, with energy weapons crisscrossing space like deadly light shows, but the combined force broke through the machine's defenses and destroyed the hub. When the last machine ship was destroyed, a strange silence fell over the battlefield. Then slowly voices began to rise in cheers and victory roars. Humans and Velkari celebrated together on ships and on dragon backs. Lauren stood on the bridge watching it all with tears in her eyes. They had done it. They had faced the darkness and won, not as separate species, but as one people united by something stronger than fear. She opened a channel to Storm where Seraphina was leading the dragon contingent. "We won," Lauren said simply. "Yes," the Queen replied, smiling. "We won, and we did it together. Ember would have been proud." Lauren looked at the stars, thinking about the journey that had brought them here, from a dying dragon in a garden to a victory that secured the future for billions. It had started with tears and tragedy, but it had ended with hope and unity that she thought was the best memorial Ember could have asked for.